Someone had to teach these bullies a lesson, but I was going further. I was going to show them hell. I would chase every last one of them until I found the culprit who did that to my sister. Growing up on the streets taught me the law of the strongest, along with the advice my father drilled into me over and over. Never get into debt. Once you owe someone, they can chain you down and ruin your life. Your life becomes like a dark room, just like the one in front of me right now. Inside, gambling addicts filled the space, their eyes dull and desperate. As soon as Sangin stepped in, the atmosphere shifted. Every gaze turned toward him, suspicious and hostile. He didn't hesitate. He called out for Boss Hio, asking if he was there, and introduced himself as a debt collector, the same job tied to the last words his father ever left behind. The reaction was immediate. The addicts grew irritated, one of them calling him a psycho and telling him to get the hell out. Before things escalated further, Boss Hio revealed himself, his expression stiff and serious. He ordered his subordinates to shut up, scolding them for disrespecting a guest. Turning back to Sangin, he offered an apology, saying his men weren't exactly known for their manners. Sangin ignored it completely. He went straight to the point and asked if the money was ready. That was when Boss Hio seemed to remember it was payment day. Reaching into his jacket, he casually explained that he had borrowed 100 million won with 3% interest for 3 months, making it 109 million won in total. But instead of money, what came out of his jacket was an axe. Without changing his expression, Sangin corrected him. Because of the compound interest clause in the contract, the exact amount was 109,272,701. Boss Hio laughed and called him team leader Kim, asking him to forget about the extra 272,001, saying it wasn't worth nitpicking over pocket change. One of the goons snickered in the background. Sangin didn't even blink. He said that precision mattered in collections, and even 272,701 was still money. Boss Hio clicked his tongue and said Sangin really was as cold as ice as the rumors claimed. If that was how he wanted to play it, then there was no reason to stay friendly. With that, he swung the axe straight at him. The blade flew toward Sangin, but he stayed calm. With a simple movement, he dodged it effortlessly. Boss Hio froze, stunned, unable to understand how the distance between them had closed so fast. Sangin commented that the man was just as shameless as people said. Then he lunged forward and drove a punch straight into the center of Boss Hio's face. The impact sent him crashing down. His goons jumped up, furious, shouting curses at Sangin. He stepped down on Boss Hio, pinning him to the floor, and calmly explained why the loan existed in the first place. He only lent money when he was confident he could get it back whenever he wanted. Hearing that, fear spread across the room. One of the goons warned the others to be careful, noticing the axe lying on the floor nearby. Boss Hio shouted at them, calling them idiots for being scared, insisting Sangin wouldn't dare do anything until the money was paid. He didn't even finish his sentence. Sangin picked up the axe and brought it down. Boss Hio screamed in agony. Leaning in close, Sangin told him not to worry. He wasn't going to kill him there. The next scene shifted to a building above ground. Inside one of the offices, a man asked his boss if that was everything they had collected so far. Right then, Kim Sangin walked in carrying 2 heavy briefcases, both packed tight with cash. He said he had closed 4 cases, including Boss Hio's. The man stared at the bags in disbelief, clearly impressed. He joked that every time Sangin returned carrying briefcases like that, he looked like a legendary general coming back from war with the enemy commander's head. Sangin handed over the money and told him to put 20% into the safe and deposit the rest into the bank. One of his colleagues couldn't hold back the praise. In 5 years of loan sharking, he had never seen anyone with a 100% collection rate. He said he was honestly glad to be on the same team as him. As the 2 employees carried the money away, they kept hyping Sangin up, throwing around all kinds of ridiculous nicknames. Sangin took off his dirty suit jacket, revealing his insane physique, and told them to cut the crap and get him a clean shirt. Another employee handed one over and mentioned that the blood stains were still fresh, so it should come out easily if they sent it to the dry cleaner right away. Then someone brought up the rookie. They wondered if it wasn't about time for the kid to stop running simple errands and start doing real work. The man in the blue tracksuit agreed and said he had already planned to give the rookie an easy case the next day. He opened a folder and announced that the rookie's first job would be collecting from a woman. The debtor was a young teacher who had come by earlier, and the 10 million won debt was perfect for training a beginner. Sangin picked up the file and silently flipped through it. Inside was a photo of a woman he clearly recognized. While the rookie excitedly celebrated his first mission, the man in the blue tracksuit frowned. Something felt off. Sangin's behavior was strange. He asked where his boss was going, reminding him that lunch had already been ordered. Without turning around, Sangin told them to eat without him. He said there was one more place he needed to visit. As the door closed behind him, one of the coworkers commented that team leader Kim really was a machine. He had been like that for 3 years straight. Sometimes it felt like the boss had built a debt-collecting robot, because the only thing that ever mattered to Sangin were the numbers. Sangin walked down a flight of stairs, his expression hard and unreadable. He headed to his next collection. An old man greeted him and offered up the insurance money from his late wife. The man dropped to his knees, begging Sangin not to take it, crying that it was the price of his wife's life. Even with the man sobbing on the floor, Sangin didn't react. He simply put the money away. He remembered that he had only come to collect what was owed, yet people always ended up begging him to save them. As he stood there, he reflected on what his job really meant. For a moment, his thoughts twisted into a bloody image. The bags of money in his hands transformed into something grotesque, something soaked in suffering. He shook it off, turned away, and told the old man there was still 28,300,001 left. He said he would be back next week. As Sangin walked out, the old man screamed after him, cursing him, shouting that he would rot in hell and burn for what he had done. Sangin didn't stop. Without a hint of emotion, he replied that he knew, even if he fell straight into hell, he would still come to collect the debt. The scene shifted again, and Kim Sangin found himself thinking about his father. The image that came to mind was always the same. A man who was constantly exhausted, crushed under debts he couldn't handle. In the end, his father chose to take his own life. What stayed burned into Sangin's memory was seeing him on the floor, day after day, kneeling and begging loan sharks for mercy. Watching from the shadows back then, the young Sangin felt only one thing. He thought it was pathetic. That memory flowed into another. After his father's death, the collectors finally turned their attention to him. He had been 15 years old, too young to understand that it was even possible to renounce an inheritance, and with it, the debts. To him, it felt like his future was already decided, that he was destined to live the same miserable life he despised in his father. That was when he made his choice. He told the loan sharks he couldn't pay the debt. The head collector interrupted him sharply, ordering him to repeat what he had just said. Sangin didn't back down. With a steady voice and a determined look, he made a proposal. Instead of paying the debt, he would collect debts for them. If he couldn't escape the blade, then he would be the one holding it. That was the moment he chose to become the one making the cuts. Back in the present, Sangin stared down at the file in his hands. His eyes stayed fixed on the details, lingering on the woman's photograph. After a short while, the scene returned to the office. The man in the blue tracksuit looked completely confused. He turned toward the rookie and scolded him for slacking off instead of heading out to collect. The rookie hurriedly explained that it wasn't his fault. The boss himself had gone to handle the case personally and had taken the file with him. The scene moved to a school. In the hallway, Sangin found the teacher. He told her about the 10 million won debt plus 3 million won in interest and demanded that she pay immediately. Calmly, he repeated the advice his father had drilled into him long ago: never, ever get into debt. That was when the teacher's identity became clear. She was Kim Ayan, his younger sister. Facing her directly, Sangin said that was the only lesson their father had ever truly left them. Tears streamed down her face as she called him Big Brother. Desperate, she grabbed the sleeve of his jacket and begged him to save her from this situation. Sangin watched her plead with a cold, distant expression. Before either of them could say anything else, a student appeared in the hallway. The boy said he had come to leave the collected homework on the teacher's desk. He glanced at Sangin and asked who he was, since he had never seen him before. Without hesitation, Sangin made up an excuse, saying he was a teacher from a neighboring school participating in an exchange program. The student accepted it without suspicion, apologized for interrupting, and quickly left. Silence filled the hallway as the siblings stared at each other. Sangin finally turned away and told her to meet him at the school gate with 13 million won ready. As he walked off, he warned her not to even think about running. She tried to call out to him, but the words caught in her throat. Sweat trickled down her face as she lowered her head, defeated, accepting her situation. Later, outside the school, Sangin waited while smoking a cigarette. His thoughts drifted to a fight he had with her years ago. Back then, she had asked him if he had lost his mind, if he had already forgotten how their father died. She shouted that their father was gone because of debt collectors and demanded to know how he could choose to become one himself. She had called him insane, said he was no better than trash for becoming a loan shark. Her final words were sharp and final. She told him to stay out of her life, that she didn't need a piece of shit like him as a brother. Now, standing there alone, Sangin reflected that it had been 10 years since she disappeared from his life. His memories tangled together, his father begging, the old man kneeling, his sister crying and asking him to save her. He wondered if this was the pathetic place she had ended up in. He stared out at the city skyline and checked his phone. She should be coming any minute. Then something caught his eye. A notification appeared on his screen. It was a message from Kim Ayan. Sangin opened the chat, already expecting some kind of excuse. As he read, his grip tightened around the phone. His expression froze. For a moment, he couldn't even process what he was seeing. he suddenly threw the phone to the ground and took off running at full speed. The message from Kim In kept replaying in his head as he ran. She wrote that she hadn't expected to see him that day. When she saw him standing in the hallway, she honestly thought she was dreaming, and without thinking, she grabbed his arm. She apologized for being so shameless in that moment. Outside the school, students were leaving in small groups when several of them suddenly looked up toward the roof, their faces drained of color. Standing there was teacher Kim In. In the message, she confessed that she felt weak and exposed because she had already decided to take her own life. She said she used to believe loan sharks were the scariest monsters in the world, but she had been wrong. There were far worse demons out there. The ones who pushed her into debt were the same people she had feared the most. She talked about her dream of becoming a teacher and called herself a fool for not realizing what kind of place she had stepped into. The classroom she once loved had turned into a living hell. She wrote that she didn't want her soul to be crushed any further, so she chose to free herself. She apologized for calling him scum in the past and for disappearing without paying back the debt. She mentioned their encounter in the hallway earlier that day, thanking him for worrying about her. And with that, she said goodbye. As Kim In's body fell from the rooftop, Kim Sang-in sprinted desperately, trying to reach her in time. In that moment, his past slammed into him all at once. He remembered realizing that he was destined to live the same pathetic life he despised in his father. He remembered the choice he made that day. Becoming the one who made the cuts wasn't just for himself, it was for his little sister. His arm stretched out in a futile attempt to reach her. The memory shifted again. He saw himself standing in front of the loan sharks, explaining through tears that if the debt wasn't paid, his younger sister would fall straight into the abyss. That same fear burned in his chest now as he ran through the streets. Before he started running, his shattered phone lay on the ground. On its cracked screen was a scheduled transfer to Kim In, 13 million won, the exact amount of the debt he had gone there to collect. The scene shifted to another day at the same school. Kim Sang-in walked down the hallway as his father's words echoed in his mind. He headed toward a classroom. Inside, students were chatting and laughing, carefree and unaware. They lived their lives not knowing that the moment you take on debt, you begin falling into a bottomless pit, and he was the embodiment of that fall. He opened the classroom door and stepped inside. All eyes turned toward him. He scanned the room carefully, searching for the demons who had tormented his sister. The image of her falling replayed in his mind, along with her last words calling herself a fool. She never realized that the real hell was inside the classroom. Standing there, surrounded by that hostile space, he greeted them politely and introduced himself as their new homeroom teacher. His name was Kim Sang-in. Inside his head, he thought that the delinquent sitting in front of him owed him a massive debt, and even if he went to hell, he would collect it. Out loud, he told the students he was looking forward to working with them. The scene shifted to National Assemblyman Park Man-cheol. He sat at a table, clearly distracted, his thoughts circling around 10 billion won. Across from him sat an older man. Park Man-cheol commented that he had been wondering why they were meeting in such an expensive place. The other man revealed himself as Chunhung Capital Chairman Hwang Byung-hyun and replied that the reason was complicated. Park Man-cheol grew visibly nervous. One of Chairman Hwang's aides interrupted, asking permission to speak with him for a moment. Before Park could finish, the door opened. A large, intimidating man asked for permission to enter. Chairman Hwang allowed it. The man leaned in and whispered something into the chairman's ear. As soon as he heard it, Chairman Hwang's expression changed completely. He stood up and said they needed to leave immediately. The congressman sat there stunned. The aide said he would start the car. Park pointed out that the food had just arrived, but Chairman Hwang brushed it off, saying to forget the meal because something far more important had come up. The next scene moved to Kim In's memorial. Her photograph stood framed among flowers. Inside the hall, Chairman Hwang knelt in front of the altar while Kim Sang-in stood quietly nearby. Dressed in a formal suit and wearing glasses, Sang-in thanked him for coming. The chairman waved it off and asked if Sang-in had been eating properly. Later, the two shared a simple meal. Chairman Hwang spoke with regret about what had happened to Kim In. He admitted that he thought Sang-in had cut ties with his sister long ago. Sang-in replied that blood ties were harder to sever than people thought. Given the situation, the chairman asked what had happened to the scumbags who had tormented her and whether a police investigation had started. Sang-in lowered his head and stayed silent for a moment, then he spoke, saying he planned to find them himself. The chairman was clearly surprised. Chairman Hwang understood the weight of what Sang-in was saying. He remembered how much Sang-in had been willing to sacrifice in the past to protect his sister. Sang-in lifted his gaze, his eyes cold, and stated that those kids owed him an enormous debt. With that, he made a request. He asked if Chairman Hwang could use his influence to make him a teacher. The chairman was shocked and questioned what he was thinking. Sangin calmly explained that it was the most efficient way to collect that debt and that he would continue fulfilling his other responsibilities as well. Hearing that reasoning, Chairman Hwang burst out laughing. He commented that he had truly turned Sangin into a real loan shark. After calming down, he agreed to help, saying that planting someone inside a school was easy enough. Sangin thanked him, but the chairman stopped him with a warning. This favor, too, was a debt. One day, Sangin would have to repay it. Sangin simply nodded and accepted the condition. The scene cut to the door of classroom 3-2. Standing in front of the class, Sangin introduced himself and announced that he would be their homeroom teacher starting that day. He asked them to take good care of him. Internally, he still couldn't identify who was responsible, but he knew they were among those students, the ones who had driven Kim In into despair. One of the female students quickly complimented his looks. Another commented on his impressive physique and asked if he worked out. A brown-haired student greeted him politely, calling him by name. Sangin ended the introductions abruptly. He told them he wouldn't be answering questions and ordered everyone to prepare for class. The students complained about his attitude, muttering that even an AI would be friendlier on the first day. As he turned to leave, Sangin stopped at the door and asked if anyone knew why teacher Kim In was gone. A heavy silence filled the room as he studied their reactions. He took the silence as an answer, then he walked out into the hallway. Back inside the classroom, the brown-haired student frowned, wondering why the new teacher would ask something like that. Suddenly, he remembered seeing Sangin with Kim In the hallway before, along with the excuse about being a teacher from another school. Connecting the names Kim In and Kim Sangin, the truth finally clicked. Meanwhile, Sangin headed to the teacher's lounge. The other teachers congratulated him on getting class 3-2, saying the students were excellent and there had never been complaints from parents. One of them mentioned that the atmosphere had been tense lately. The students who witnessed the incident were receiving psychiatric treatment and 6 were currently on medical leave. Sangin reflected on it all. He wondered why someone who got along so well with students would end up like that. Later, watching students play soccer outside, he felt something was deeply wrong. Still, he couldn't find a single obvious flaw. Class 3-2 was known as a model class, and Kim In's relationship with them had seemed good. Just to be sure, he reviewed the educational records and his sister's class diaries. Even after digging around as much as he could, Kim Sangin couldn't find any clear proof of bullying. No matter how deep he looked, there were no obvious traces left behind. Still, the memory of his sister's desperate plea for help kept resurfacing in his head, refusing to let go. She had talked about cruel demons, and now he couldn't stop wondering who those people really were. That was when he heard it, an aggressive voice cursing loudly. He stopped walking and paid attention. Getting closer, he saw a group of students arguing. One of the delinquents snapped at a girl, telling her to repeat what she had just said, spitting insults as he did. The girl's name was Baek Soyeon. It didn't take long to understand what was going on. The boys had borrowed money from her. She explained, her voice trembling, that it had already been 2 months since she lent them the money and that they had promised to pay her back within a week. The moment she said that, Sangin's mind slipped into a memory. He remembered his sister's funeral. The old man had been there, telling him to go back inside. That same night, Baek Soyeon had been running down the stairs in a panic. She burst into the funeral hall, desperate, calling out for teacher Ayin. Sangin had remained outside, his expression stiff and unreadable, watching her pass by from the corner of his eye. Her face had been soaked with tears, completely shattered by grief. Back in the present, the delinquents laughed, mocking Soyeon for daring to ask for her money back. The red-haired boy stepped forward and casually said he'd pay what he owed. He even asked if the total was 500,000 won, and when she nodded, he suddenly slapped her across the face. He sneered, complaining that she was making a scene over just 50,000 won between classmates. Soyeon collapsed to her knees, begging him to return at least half of it. The boy only called her an idiot, saying she shouldn't have lent the money if she planned to ask for it back later. His eyes were filled with nothing but contempt, not a trace of guilt in sight. She stayed frozen on the floor, completely lost. Then another student with brown hair stepped in and asked her quietly if she really needed the money. When she said yes, the red-haired boy crouched down in front of her, grinning, and suggested she hang out with them later. He promised he'd pay her then. The proposal left her completely stunned. As they walked away, he told her to dress up nicely, laughing while one of his friends teased him. The scene shifted. At a small restaurant, a landlord was shouting that the rent was 2 months overdue. An older woman begged for a few more days, but the man refused. She tried to explain that the money had disappeared, but he didn't buy her excuse. Soyeon stood there, panicking, wondering what to do as he accused her of being robbed. Her mind slipped into another memory. The red-haired boy had asked her for 500,000 won, promising to return it soon. She told him she didn't have that kind of money, but he didn't believe her. Along with his friends, he pressured her in front of her mother's shop. When he realized her mother wasn't around, his tone changed. Out of fear, she had taken the money from the register. The guilt crushed her chest, but telling the truth wouldn't magically bring the money back. Back in the present, her phone vibrated. A message popped up. It was from Park Dejin. He said he had withdrawn the 500,000 won to pay her back. She stared at the screen, completely stunned, unsure how to react. That night, she arrived at a Karaoke bar and stood in front of room number 3. After knocking, Park Dejin opened the door, surprised to see her, then smiled and invited her inside. His friends were already there. He promised she'd have fun. She told him flat out she wasn't there to have fun, she was there for her money. He placed his hands on her shoulders, asking why she was making things difficult. He implied she knew exactly why she had come and what she was supposed to do. When she played dumb, he tried to take off her jacket, claiming it was hot inside. Panic hit her instantly. She screamed for him to stop. The other boys only watched. One even commented on how hot she was. Park Dejin laughed, calling her a tsundere, saying that just made it better. With tears streaming down her face, she begged them to let her go, insisting she only wanted her money. They ignored her. He held her tighter and asked for a bottle of water. Someone was already rushing toward the room. The boys joked about making her put on a show and recording a legendary video. As another one approached with the bottle, telling her to stay quiet so they could get her wet, her world collapsed. In pure desperation, she closed her eyes and thought of her teacher, but nothing happened. The room fell silent. Everyone froze. Then Park Dejin looked toward the door, his face draining of color. Kim Sang-an was standing there. Without expression, Kim Sang-an ordered Park Dejin to let go of the girl immediately. Baek Soyeon turned toward him, stunned. She recognized him at once. Her mind jumped back to teacher Ian's funeral, to the moment she had cried uncontrollably in front of the altar. She remembered seeing him there that day, standing aside, and now she couldn't understand why he was here. Park Dejin clicked his tongue, clearly irritated by the interruption, and demanded to know who this old man thought he was, barging in and giving orders. Even when Sang-an repeated himself, the boy refused to let go, mocking him like the situation was a joke. One of the delinquents muttered that he recognized the guy as the new teacher for Class 2, but his friend didn't give a damn. Eventually, Park Dejin shoved Soyeon aside and told her to disappear for a second. He turned back to Sang-an and asked if he knew her, smirking as he wondered aloud if he was her uncle or something. His taunts kept coming, suggesting maybe Sang-an was Baek Soyeon's boyfriend, asking her if she was dating an older guy because she was broke. He didn't even finish the sentence. Kim Sang-an's fist slammed straight into the center of Park Dejin's face. The impact was brutal. The boy flew across the room and crashed hard into the wall, the sound echoing as everyone froze in shock. Baek Soyeon stared at the scene, completely stunned, finally starting to understand what was happening. Sang-an's mind flickered back to the funeral again. He remembered thanking her for coming to say goodbye to Ayan. She had been the only student there. Looking at her now, he remembered the debt he owed her, and he knew he would never forget it. The other two delinquents stood there, speechless, staring at their leader sprawled on the floor. One of them muttered in disbelief, wondering if Park Dejin had really gone flying from a single punch. Sang-an turned to them calmly and stated that they had borrowed 500,000 won from Baek Soyeon without signing any contract. Seeing their confusion, he continued, explaining that he would calculate the debt with 30% interest per week. Since the payment was already 8 weeks overdue, the amount had changed. Soyeon's eyes widened as he named the new total, 4,786,531 won. Park Dejin, still on the floor, exploded in anger, yelling that the amount was insane and asking why he should pay that much. Sang-an stepped closer and told him coldly that a debt taken must always be repaid. The boy shouted back that he had only borrowed 500,000 won. Sang-an agreed calmly, saying it didn't make sense at first, but from now on it would. Elsewhere, one of Sang-an's subordinates watched from outside. The rookie asked why they were following those students and why their boss had gone into the bar alone. The man in the blue tracksuit snapped at him, telling him to shut up and remember one thing. When the boss moved, they moved. He didn't know the exact reason, but he knew this much. Once those kids became the boss's target, they were completely screwed. Back inside, Park Dejin wiped blood from his face and struggled to his feet, demanding to know who Sang-an thought he was, sticking his nose into their business and ordering them to pay debts. Sang-an introduced himself without hesitation. His name was Kim Sang-an, the homeroom teacher of Class 3-2 at Solbit High. The words hit Baek Soyeon like a truck. She realized he was the teacher of the class belonging to the teacher who had passed away. The other delinquents were just as shocked, one of them accusing Sang-an of being a teacher who beat students and extorted money. Sang-an corrected him calmly. He wasn't extorting anything, he was settling a debt between students. He added that correcting problematic financial relationships between classmates was also part of a teacher's responsibility. One of the boys pointed out that Sang-an had thrown the first punch, deciding that there was nothing left to talk about. The three charged at him, shouting that he'd better prepare for the beating of his life. Sang sighed, commenting that all he did was ask them to pay their debt, yet they still chose violence. The next moment his fist smashed into one boy's face. Another precise strike knocked out the second delinquent instantly. Finally, he turned to the leader. In the blink of an eye, it was over. All three delinquents lay defeated on the floor. Park Dejin stared up in disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. Baek Soyeon stood there, speechless, surrounded by fallen bodies. Sangin told them they had until 5 p.m. the next day to pay the debt. If they missed the deadline, he pressed his foot down on Park Dejin's head and said they would wish they were in hell. After that, he turned to Soyeon and confirmed her name. He told her not to just stand there and to go home. She looked confused by his blunt attitude. As they left, she called him teacher and thanked him for saving her. Without turning around, Sangin told her not to worry and to go home safely. She watched his back, wondering who he really was. She assumed he must be Aen's older brother. Remembering his promise not to forget the dead, she wondered if that was why he helped her. The coincidence felt too big to ignore, so she asked if he came to the school to find out what really happened to Aen. Sangin didn't answer. She warned him that he shouldn't have helped her, that those boys would never let it go. If they reported what happened, he could be expelled from school. Sangin listened quietly and replied with calm confidence that they would see what happened. The next day at school, students crowded around a phone, whispering about some insane video moves. Baek Soyeon sat at her desk, uneasy. Nothing had happened. She thought the delinquents would go after both her and the teacher, yet Park Dejin was sitting quietly at his desk like nothing was wrong. Then one of the other bullies stood up and walked toward her. He stopped in front of her desk and called her name. Baek Soyeon's body tensed, bracing herself. Instead, he showed her his phone and told her he had transferred exactly 1,359,511 won. He explained it was his share of the debt, divided equally among the three of them. He asked her to tell the teacher he'd paid, then walked away. She stood there, frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Park Dejin slammed his desk in rage, calling his friend a complete idiot. After class, Park Dejin grabbed the boy by the collar outside and demanded to know if he'd lost his mind. He yelled that paying the debt after getting beaten once was already insane, but paying only his own share made it even worse. The boy shouted back, desperate, saying that wasn't the real problem. He told him the others had received something too. Park Dejin froze, completely clueless. His mind jumped back to what happened right after Kim Sangin left the Karaoke bar. Furious, he had sworn he'd report everything to the police and the school. That was when all three of their phones buzzed at the same time. One of them stared at his screen in horror, his hands trembling as he asked what kind of sick joke this was. The message had been sent to all of them. Back in the present, Park Dejin shook his friend again, demanding to know if he'd seen it too. The boy explained frantically that the message contained everything: passwords, home addresses, their parents' information, even the addresses of relatives he didn't even know existed. His friend yelled at him Kim Sangin wasn't a normal person. They had messed with the wrong guy. The third delinquent pulled out his phone and started typing, confusing Park Dejin even more. He said he had to pay immediately. If his dad found out, his life was over. Hearing that, Park Dejin snapped, calling them traitors. The blonde one apologized, saying he just didn't want anything to do with that teacher anymore. Before leaving, they warned Park Dejin to pay up too if he didn't want real trouble. The scene shifted to classroom 3-6 during an economics class. Park Dejin sat there in misery, wondering if he should pay as well. The problem was simple: he didn't have the money. He'd lost everything messing around with cryptocurrency. Kim Sangin suddenly appeared beside his desk and commented that he looked distracted. With a cold stare, he reminded him that it was almost 5 p.m. and told him to save his useless thoughts for when he got home. Anger boiled over. After class, Park Dejin slammed his fist into the wall, demanding to know who the hell that teacher was, showing up out of nowhere and ruining his life. That was when the brown-haired student approached him. He asked if Park Dejin was in trouble because of the teacher. He mentioned hearing his friends asking to borrow money earlier that morning. Park Dejin snapped back, calling them disloyal beggars. The brown-haired student calmly suggested there might be another way, one where he wouldn't have to pay the debt at all. He asked if Park Dejin wanted to hear it. Curiosity won out. Later that day, after classes ended, Kim Sangin waited in the schoolyard. Baek Soyeon approached him and called him by name. Without wasting time, he asked if she'd managed to collect the debt. She told him everyone had paid except Park Dejin. Thanks to that money, her mother had been able to cover the shop's rent. She bowed deeply, thanking him over and over. Sangin brushed it off, saying he was only paying back what he owed. Then he glanced to the side and added that there was still one debt left. Park Dejin walked toward them. He stared at Sangin with a smug expression, a faint smirk on his lips. Soyeon grew nervous just seeing him. Sangin asked him directly if he'd brought the money. Park Dejin played dumb, asking what money and whether the teacher seriously thought he'd pay. his mind flashed back to his conversation with the brown-haired student. The guy had said the solution was simple: make a deal. Just like Park Deejin's personal information had been used against him, teachers also had secrets. He claimed to know something about Kim Sang-in. Back in the present, Park Deejin extended his hand and said he wanted to make a deal. Sang-in looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Park Deejin smirked and clarified. He said he'd tell him the real reason Kim In jumped from the building if the teacher erased his debt. Sang-in didn't react. He just said calmly that it was already past 5 p.m. The response left Park Deejin completely confused. Sang-in started walking toward him. Panic set in. Park Deejin asked why he was getting closer, desperately trying to reinforce his offer. He repeated that he'd tell him everything about the teacher's death if they made a deal. Without hesitation, Kim Sang-in grabbed him by the throat. He reminded him that he had already warned him. His grip tightened as he repeated the condition. If the debt wasn't paid by 5 p.m., the debtor would wish he were in hell. His eyes were cold, unwavering. A memory surfaced. Someone was begging for his life. Boss Huang's voice echoed, telling a young Sang-in to watch carefully. He ordered his men to proceed. The debtor cried, swore he'd pay everything back. Boss Huang told Sang-in to look closely at that face to get used to it, because it was the kind of face he'd see often. Young Sang-in watched in silence, his expression serious. Back in the present, the memory sharpened his resolve. His grip on Park Deejin's neck tightened even more. Park Deejin begged for help. Baek Soyeon covered her mouth, horrified, begging Sang-in to stop. He ignored her plea, staring calmly at the boy struggling in his grasp. He commented that it was almost funny how easily people begged for their lives. Then he dropped him. Park Deejin collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Sang-in looked down at him and remarked how easily he begged. With a chilling tone, he added that he hadn't even started yet. Park Deejin cursed at him, wondering why the teacher just leave like that. He wondered if the teacher was going to call his parents. He said he didn't need to worry about that. His mom had abandoned him, and his dad was away on business. Then a car pulled up beside him. One of Kim Sang-in's partners stepped out. In one swift motion, the man in the tracksuit grabbed him from behind and covered his mouth with a cloth. He whispered that Park Deejin was unlucky. If his parents could pay, he wouldn't have to do this. He told him to sleep because he'd need a lot of strength. Darkness took over. Park Deejin woke up screaming as ice-cold water was thrown in his face. A man in fisherman's clothes stood in front of him, asking how long he planned to sleep. He told him to get to work if he wanted to pay off his debt, because every minute counted. Disoriented, Park Deejin complained about the smell of rotten fish and demanded to know where he was. Only then did he realize he was on a fishing boat, drifting in the middle of the ocean. 10 days passed. At first, he didn't accept it. He tried to explain that there had been a mistake, that he was just a student. The fisherman ignored him. When he kept talking, the man grabbed him by the hair and slammed him onto the deck, pressing a knife close to his neck. There were only 2 ways off that boat. One was to work hard and pay the debt properly. The other was to get beaten half to death, then work anyway. Surrounded by the crew, Park Deejin had no choice. For the first time in his life, he worked with his hands. He had no skills, and the fisherman taught him by kicking him whenever he messed up. After 4 days, he could finally handle the nets on his own. He cursed his miserable life, dreaming about something as simple as a hamburger. Time dragged and rushed at the same time. His sense of reality blurred as exhaustion consumed him on the deck. 10 days later, the scene returned to Salbit High. Some students noticed a strange figure approaching the school. Everyone freezes for a second, staring at the figure standing there. For a brief moment, fear creeps in and they even wonder if it's some kind of zombie, with one of them half-seriously thinking about calling the police. Then someone finally recognizes him. It's Park Deejin. He looks completely wrecked, like he's been dragged through hell and back, and the moment it clicks, he lets out a breath like his nightmare is finally over. He's clearly traumatized. As he walks down the hallway of Salbit High, he swears to himself that he will never borrow money again for as long as he lives. He also promises, right then and there, that he will never step foot on that cursed boat ever again. That resolve lasts all of 5 seconds. Kim Sang-in appears in front of him and casually shatters that promise by telling him he'll be back on the boat next week. The words hit Park Deejin like a truck. Completely stunned, he turns to the teacher, demanding to know what the hell he's talking about, clearly not understanding a single thing. Enraged, the red-haired delinquent shouts that he worked his ass off for 10 days on that filthy, stinking boat just to pay off what he owed. Kim Sang-in cuts him off mid-rant. He tells him not to jump to conclusions because the debt isn't paid yet. Park Deejin just stands there, completely lost. Kim Sang-in calmly explains that the moment Park Deejin got on that boat, he missed a payment. Because of that, the original debt of 1,359,551 increased with interest to 1,767,417 won. While he was still working on the boat, more interest piled up. bringing the total to 2,297,641 won. By the time the numbers finish coming out of Kim Sang-an's mouth, Park Dejin's face has gone completely pale. Kim Sang-an then breaks down the earnings. The boat pays 170,000 won per day, but since Park Dejin was only an apprentice, 70,000 won was deducted. On top of that, there was a 30,000 won agency fee. In the end, his net daily earning was only 70,000 won. Over 10 days, that comes out to 700,000 won. Kim Sang-an finishes the calculation by stating that Park Dejin still owes 1,597,641 won. Completely desperate, Park Dejin shouts that this is a violation of human rights and that it has to be illegal, screaming that he only borrowed 500,000 won in the first place. Kim Sang-an asks him if he really thinks it's right to not pay his debts and reminds him that he's the one who got him that job. He adds that if it weren't for that job, the interest would have snowballed into something far worse. Park Dejin has nothing to say after that. Seeing how things stand, Kim Sang-an tells him to get ready. The next boat leaves in 4 days. He also mentions that everything will be registered as an internship so it won't affect his school attendance. Just the thought of going back to that boat terrifies Park Dejin to his core. The scene shifts to Chunhung Capital. Inside the office, someone calls for the team leader. A rookie hands over a report related to the investigation Kim Sang-an requested. He explains that because there were so many targets, they hired 3 different agencies. So far, 10 out of the 20 students in Class 3-2 have been investigated. Kim Sang-an asks if they found anything strange. The rookie says that's exactly why the agencies asked for confirmation. There are no anomalies at all. The records are suspiciously clean, especially considering the request came directly from the boss. The 10 students they checked aren't just normal students, they're practically model students. Kim Sang-an asks if the investigation followed the roll call order. The rookie confirms it did. That means the next student on the list is Yi-jun. At that moment, Kim Sang-an's phone vibrates on the desk. It's a message from Park Dejin, telling someone else to bring the money to a specific address. After reading it, Kim Sang-an tells the rookie to go home early. He has something to take care of. The location turns out to be a claw machine arcade. Park Dejin is already there, pacing back and forth, clearly impatient. Inside his head, he's cursing Kim Sang-an nonstop, wondering if that teacher seriously thinks he's some kind of slave. His expression twists with hatred as he mutters that debt or no debt, that bastard is going to regret today. He remembers something Yi-jun once said, joking about how terrifying it is to force a student onto a boat like that. Park Dejin didn't find it funny back then, and he sure as hell doesn't now. He complains that he did exactly what he was told, worked himself to the bone, and still ended up completely screwed. Desperate, he begs for help, saying he already got rid of one teacher before. Faced with that level of desperation, Yi-jun finally agrees to help. The answer comes so easily that it leaves Park Dejin completely stunned. Yi-jun explains that last time, he was just testing the waters with the teacher, but this time he'll help properly. He adds that he needs to step in now because things might get annoying otherwise. Then he casually drops the real bomb, revealing that Kim Sang-an is Kim I-an's older brother. The revelation hits Park Dejin like a punch to the gut. He blurts out that doesn't that just make everything even more complicated. Yi-jun tells him to stop overthinking it and just focus on luring the teacher to the spot he prepared. Park Dejin waits at the claw machine arcade, nerves stretched thin. Not long after, Kim Sang-an shows up, calmly approaching the meeting place. He tells Park Dejin that he brought the money this time. The red-haired delinquent scoffs and tells him to stop talking like some lone shark circling prey, openly admitting that he didn't bring a single one. Kim Sang-an doesn't look surprised. He comments that he figured Park Dejin was bold, but apparently even bolder than expected. He asks if he's really sure about what he's doing and points out that it doesn't look like he has enough people. Several men are already hiding nearby. Caught off guard, Park Dejin orders his men to come out instead of hiding like idiots. A gang of men armed with bats steps forward, surrounding Kim Sang-an in the narrow hallway of the arcade. Park Dejin lays out his demands. First, his debt is to be considered completely paid. Second, Kim Sang-an is to leave Solbit High immediately. Kim Sang-an ignores both demands and asks a single question. He wants to know who's behind this. The question leaves Park Dejin confused. Kim Sang-an walks forward, straight toward the gang, and calmly states that the leader of these delinquents doesn't have the brains to plan something like this. Panic flashes across Park Dejin's face. He shouts for his men to attack, screaming for them to just get it over with already. Kim Sang-an stays calm, commenting that this really is their limit. One of the goons charges at him with a bat, yelling at him to wake up to reality. Kim Sang-an easily dodges the swing and immediately counters. In one clean motion, his hand connects with the attacker's face, sending the man flying straight into a machine. Park Dejin stands there completely shocked, unable to say a word. Kim Sang-in asks again who planned this. He releases one of the men he's holding and stares at the group with pure hatred in his eyes, repeating the question. The remaining goons hesitate. One of them mutters that they're all getting beaten by just one guy. Annoyed, their leader shouts at them to drag the teacher over immediately. They rush him from all sides. Even surrounded, Kim Sang-in doesn't panic. He moves and the beating starts. One punch after another drops the attackers. It's completely one-sided. One moment he's striking, the next someone is flying backward. When it's over, the men are sprawled across the floor, and Kim Sang-in looks exactly the same as before, cold and unfazed. One of the men snaps, cursing Kim Sang-in and swinging his bat wildly. Kim Sang-in ducks, grabs him by the neck, and slams him into a machine without hesitation. Their leader screams in frustration, yelling that they shouldn't attack one by one and ordering everyone to charge at once. He shouts that they can't possibly lose to an unarmed guy wearing glasses. A teddy bear suddenly flies out of a claw machine and smacks the leader square in the face, knocking him out cold. Park Dejin watches the scene, frozen. He can't understand what he's seeing. He watches his men get destroyed and can't comprehend how Kim Sang-in is winning so easily. Once everyone is down, Kim Sang-in wipes the blood from his hand and tells Park Dejin that the troublemakers are gone. That's when Park Dejin runs. He screams in pure terror, convinced that if he gets caught, he's dead. He trips, crashes to the ground, and crawls desperately across the floor. Looking back at the unconscious men, he realizes he doesn't want to end up like them. Fueled by fear, he scrambles up and runs for his life. Kim Sang-in watches him go without moving, commenting that it doesn't matter. He'll realize the truth soon enough. Standing in the wrecked hallway, he adds that once you've seen the light, there's nowhere left to run. Running as fast as his legs will carry him, Park Dejin calls Eum Yi-jun in a panic. His voice shakes as he explains that every single goon he hired was completely wiped out. He barely managed to escape and keeps repeating that if he gets caught, he's finished. He begs for help, almost crying into the phone. On the other end, Yi-jun listens calmly and then tells him to deposit 5 million won. The number leaves Park Dejin completely confused. Yi-jun explains that the money is for the hiring fee of the men. Park Dejin explodes, yelling that Yi-jun promised to help him. With a mocking tone, Yi-jun replies that he never said the help would be free and asks if he seriously thinks using that many people comes cheap. Park Dejin screams that he's already buried in debt and asks if Yi-jun thinks he has that kind of money. Yi-jun simply says that's his problem. Right then, two suspicious figures quietly approach Park Dejin from behind. One of them tells him to follow them quietly, while Yi-jun calmly informs him over the phone that from now on, Park Dejin owes him a favor. Still on the line, Yi-jun casually explains the new debt. It comes with a 45% annual compound interest. He tells Park Dejin to do as the men say. With a wicked edge to his voice, Yi-jun promises to find him a nice job so he can start paying everything back. Park Dejin tries to protest, but it's useless. Later, alone in his apartment, Yi-jun reflects on Kim Sang-in. He admits to himself that he was just testing the waters, but the result was way beyond what he expected. A slow smile spreads across his face. This is going to be fun. Back at the claw machine arcade, one of the fallen goons struggles to his feet and mutters that the teacher is a monster. At that moment, a man with long white hair appears, scolding them for making such a mess while he was gone. His neck is lined with scars. The battered goon recognizes him instantly and calls him team leader, asking how he got there. The white-haired man asks if a leader shouldn't know where his subordinates are. He looks around at the bloody scene and says he didn't expect things to get this bad. He orders the man to explain what happened. The goon stammers through the story, saying it all started because of a kid from Salbit High. Someone asked them to take care of a teacher, and he accepted the extra job. They were all defeated. The team leader asks how much he was paid. The goon hesitates before answering that it was 5 million won. The white-haired man looks genuinely disappointed. He scolds him for taking such a cheap job that stained their reputation and on top of that, for losing to a single teacher. The goon tries to argue that the teacher isn't normal, but the team leader smashes his head with a hammer before he can finish. Standing over him, the white-haired man says there's no way that should have happened. He continues, saying that carrying the business card from Good Capital, they shouldn't lose to one teacher. The team leader of Good Capital's collection team demands to know who will take responsibility if this leaks. With that, he decides to handle it himself. He asks for the teacher's name. All the beaten man can say is Kim. The team leader repeats it, then completes it himself. Kim Sang, he says the name slowly, a sinister smile forming on his face. So the man's name is Kim Sang. The scene shifts back to the Chunhung Capital office late at night. Kim Sang-in notices the rookie still there and asks why he hasn't gone home yet. The rookie explains that since he's still a half-baked loan shark who can't collect on his own, the least he can do is handle paperwork. As Kim Sang-in adjusts his tie, the rookie admits that he wants to become a loan shark like him as soon as possible. Kim Sang-in wonders out loud why anyone would want that. The rookie keeps going, praising him, saying that team leader Kim is the #1 loan shark in Korea and his role model. Kim Sang-in shuts that down immediately, saying loan sharks are nothing but scum. The rookie is completely confused as Kim Sang-in continues. He says loan sharks are monsters who value money more than human lives, creatures who drag desperate people into hell. He says their scum guaranteed a place in hell once they die. He takes off his jacket and shirt, revealing a body covered in scars, and asks if the rookie still wants to become that kind of person, knowing he's standing at the very top of that pile of trash. The rookie admits the job is dirty, no denying it. Kim Sang-in tells him to go home, but the rookie stops him. He says Kim Sang-in isn't that kind of scum. He heard about his past from one of the older employees. He learned that Kim Sang-in gave up his own life for his younger sister and willingly walked into that hell for her. With conviction, the rookie says that if calling Kim Sang-in scum is right, then he doesn't mind becoming scum too. Those words made Kim Sang-in remember something, pulling him back to hospital room. He remembers the rookie kneeling on the floor, head lowered, begging Chunhung Capital chairman Hwang Byung-hyun. Back then, the rookie pleaded with him to cover the cost of the surgery of his sister, promising he would do anything in return. Absolutely anything. Coming back to the present, Kim Sang-in realizes the rookie is just like he was back when he was young. Moved by that loyalty, Kim Sang-in tells the boy that if he really insists on becoming scum like him, he won't stop him. The rookie tries to explain himself further, but Kim Sang-in cuts him off while putting his jacket back on. He tells him he's promoted. Starting tomorrow, he'll be allowed to go out on collections alone. On top of that, he'll get a 10% bonus. With his back turned, Kim Sang-in adds one condition. He tells him to promise that the moment he finishes paying off the surgery fee he borrowed, he'll leave the loan shark life for good. The rookie pauses, thinking it over. Then with a determined look, he promises he'll do everything he can to get out of that life. Kim Sang-in leaves the office. Later that night, walking alone down the street, he starts piecing everything together. Park Dejin definitely had an accomplice, but Park Dejin is broke. There's no way he could have hired those men himself. That means whoever helped him wasn't interested in money, which leads to a different conclusion. It wasn't really an accomplice. It was someone using Park Dejin to test him. The question is why? Why would someone want him out of Solbit High? A hunch forms in his mind as he stops in front of a door. The most likely reason is that someone knows the real reason Kim In is gone and wants to stop Kim Sang-in from digging any deeper. Once that clicks, he realizes he doesn't need to chase whoever's behind this. The closer he gets to the truth about his sister's disappearance, the more that person will be forced to reveal themselves. Then he casually remembers that he forgot his tie. The scene shifts back to the Chunhung Capital office. The rookie is practically bouncing with excitement over his promotion. He's thrilled that he'll finally get to go out on collections and escape the boring desk work. He starts thinking about what he should wear on his first job and decides that looking intimidating is the most important thing. Suddenly inspired, he blurts out that intimidating means wearing glasses, just like the boss. He imagines himself with a sharp look and even comes up with a cool line for his first collection. While daydreaming, he notices something strange hanging on the coat rack. At that moment, a silhouette appears in the doorway. The rookie jumps in surprise and asks if he really came back just for that, adding that he could have just called. The silence feels off, then something attacks the rookie. The scene cuts to the front of the building as Kim Sang-in is outside. He pauses on the sidewalk, a worried look crossing his face. After a brief moment, he turns around and rushes back inside. He finds the rookie sitting in a chair, covered in blood. Shock flashes across Kim Sang-in's face as he realizes the boy was attacked. He approaches and examines the injuries, quickly noticing they weren't caused by a knife or bare hands. Checking his pulse, he confirms the rookie is still alive. A white-haired man suddenly lunges out from the shadows, swinging a hammer. Kim Sang-in catches it with his bare hand. The white-haired man says that this hurts the attacker's pride, having a surprise attack blocked like that. He pulls back the hammer and grins, clearly pleased that Kim Sang-in remembers him. Kim Sang-in thinks this is going to be troublesome. Kim Sang-in calls him Choi Ochial, team leader of Good Capital. He asks what kind of trouble Kim Sang-in thinks this will cause. Choi Ochial says a loan shark swinging a hammer is perfectly normal, but Kim Sang-in warns him that attacking an employee without reason could turn this into a company-level conflict. Choi Ochial scoffs and asks if he looks like some psycho who attacks without reason. That's when it clicks for Kim Sang-in. The men he beat earlier belonged to Good Capital. They attacked first. The realization pulls him into another memory. He recalls a conversation with Chairman Hwang Byung-hyun when the chairman helped coordinate things with the Solbit High Foundation to get him the job. Back then, Kim Sang-in thanked him, but the chairman warned him to be careful. He made it clear this was personal and that Kim Sang-in shouldn't drag the company into it. Back in the present, Kim Sang-in admits to himself that this is indeed a problem, and it's one he'll have to solve alone. Choi Ochial says that after thinking it over, he has more than enough reasons to finish Kim Sang-in off. He tells him to prepare himself. Kim Sang-in remarks that Choi Ochial came running here just thinking about beating him. The white-haired man laughs, saying it's been years since he's felt this excited. With a twisted smile, Choi Ochial asks if Kim Sang-in is looking forward to what's coming. His mind drifts to a lesson from his past. To survive in that world, you had to become something monstrous. The memory shifts. A younger Kim Sang-in is hanging, injured, barely conscious, while the white-haired man looks down at him and says he knows exactly what loan sharks are like. He explains that debtors think in a completely twisted way. They only pay when they truly believe they'll die if they don't. The white-haired man calmly pointed out that the young guy was doing everything he could to pay off his father's debt, mostly because he didn't want to end up dead. Then he paused, corrected himself, and said the situation was a little different. It wasn't fear of them that drove the kid. It was fear of something else entirely. The real reason was that he was scared his younger sister would be the one to meet that end instead. Hearing that made Kim Sang-in clench his teeth so hard his jaw ached. That reaction clearly irritated the white-haired man, who asked if Sang-in didn't like the way he trained rookies. He complained about the kind of rookie boss Huang had dumped on him and with a sneer pulled a hammer from his belt. He said the kid was useless. The look on his face was twisted, almost pleased, as he raised the hammer and said he'd start by breaking one of Sang-in's ribs. Back in the present, Choi Ochial casually remarked on how fast time passed, saying that now even rookies like the collector were wearing team leader badges. With that, the two rivals squared off, tension hanging heavy in the air as the inevitable clash began. Choi Ochial charged first, hammer in hand, shouting that he wanted to see how much his former student had grown. Kim Sang-in dodged the swing with clean, sharp movement, his body reacting almost instinctively. The speed surprised the Chunhung capital leader, who muttered that Sang-in had gotten a lot faster and found himself remembering the old days. Back then, that swing would have already cracked the kid's skull open. As the fight continued, Choi Ochial studied his opponent's reactions and realized something important. Sang-in wasn't trying to turn this into a huge incident. When the taunts came, Sang-in said he had a solution and told him to listen carefully. Choi Ochial slammed his foot into the ground and said the solution was simple. He rushed forward again, yelling that the collector just needed to smash his head into the floor and apologize. After the attack, he paused and casually asked what Sang-in thought about the proposal, asking if they had a deal. Holding his stance, Sang-in corrected him. He said that, to be precise, it was Choi Ochial's men who attacked first, and on top of that, they'd left one of his colleagues in a coma. With a steady, unyielding look, he said he wouldn't apologize for that. The refusal sent Choi Ochial into a blind rage. He remembered how the collector always refused to obey him, how that attitude had always rubbed him the wrong way. Hammer clenched tight, he charged again, yelling that this stubbornness was exactly why he couldn't stand him. He went on, spitting venom, complaining that Kim Sang-in was always good at following Boss Huang's orders, everyone else's orders, just never his. To him, this fight was the perfect chance to finally teach that lesson. Sang-in braced himself. Sweat slid down his face as he realized he didn't have much time. His injured colleague, the one bleeding, was still sitting on the chair and needed a hospital immediately. Choi Ochial scoffed at that concern, asking if now was really the time to worry about some random subordinate, telling him to focus on the fight. He attacked again and Sang-in dodged the first attack. When he was about to throw a punch, the hammer came back. Sang-in blocked with his closed fist. Choi remembered an old lesson he taught Sang-in: blood start dripping. When facing someone with a blunt weapon, you sometimes had to take a risk and dive into the opening. Choi Ochial even praised him for following that teaching, but that tactic won't work on the one who taught it. Choi Ochial growled, saying that even now, Sang-in's eyes hadn't changed, that he was still the same scumbag he couldn't stand. Sang-in replied that it seemed Choi really hated him, and oddly enough, that was a relief. He said he felt the same, then he grabbed Choi's arm to force his way closer. The move completely shocked Choi Ochial. For a moment he wondered if Sang-in had failed to dodge on purpose, then it clicked. The way Sang-in moved was exactly how he'd been taught. He was trying to make him believe he'd predicted everything. Grinding his teeth, Choi Ochial admitted that the apprentice had grown. That was when Sang-in finally explained why he always refused his orders. He said that Choi Ochial had given him commands he could never accept. The memory surfaced clearly, an order to take the child of a woman who couldn't pay her debt. As that memory burned, Sang-in's fist crashed into Choi Ochial's face, slamming him into the ground. Blood poured from Choi Ochial's nose as he was thrown back. Sang-in kept talking, listing the filthy orders he'd been given over the years, like burning down shops to force people to delay payments. Another punch landed square in his rival's stomach. Finally, he spoke about how Choi Ochial took pleasure in people's despair. That disgusted him more than anything. With that, he put him down for good. Lying on the floor, Choi Ochial couldn't believe it. The rookie he'd trained himself was now standing over him, looking down with absolute dominance. Bleeding and laughing bitterly, Choi Ochial asked if Sangin really thought he was any different, calling him a righteous loan shark. He said they were the same kind of scum. Sangin didn't deny it. He said he was scum too, but there was one difference. At least he didn't enjoy this kind of work. With that, he turned to leave, saying it was good to see him again, leaving the white-haired man stunned. Choi Ochial shouted after him, asking if he was really going to just leave him there. Sangin confirmed it, saying his colleague wasn't doing well. Irritated, Choi Ochial called him an idiot and threatened him, saying if he let him live, it wouldn't end like this, that if he wanted to settle things, he should finish him right there. Holding his injured colleague, Sangin reminded him that he was also a loan shark and understood better than anyone what debt meant. As he walked away, he said that from that moment on, Choi Ochial owed him his life. The condition was simple. The day this incident leaked would be the day that debt was due. He warned him not to get emotional like he had today and called his name one last time. Sangin left the office carrying the rookie, heading down the stairs alone, worn down but resolute. Left behind, Choi Ochial muttered that that bastard Kim Sangin now owned his life. He laughed bitterly, mocking the advice about not acting emotionally, saying that for someone who said that, Sangin himself was far too emotional. The scene shifted to Sote University Hospital at night. The rookie Makni woke up in a hospital bed, his head wrapped in bandages. Disoriented, he looked around until he noticed his boss standing near the window, which startled him. Sangin told him to relax and rest. The man asked what happened and who the attacker was. Sangin explained that he used to be his team leader back when he was a rookie and that he now worked for another company. Worried, the man asked if it was an attack from the competition. Sangin shook his head and said the real target had been him, and his colleague had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sangin asked why he hadn't gone home so late, and the man explained he'd been organizing student records from Salbit High. Then he remembered something and said he'd found a very strange student. He was sure the kid wasn't normal. That caught Sang-an's attention. The scene moved to classroom 3-2. Sang-an was taking attendance, calling out names one by one. When he called Eum Yi-jun, the brown-haired student stood up and answered. Looking down at the list, Sang-an repeated the name, surprised. Someone asked if he hadn't already called it once. Back at the hospital, Makni explained what he meant by not normal. He said that every investigation agency they hired refused to look into one specific student. Sang-an stared at him, knowing exactly what that meant. The man said this only happened when a target was considered dangerous. Then he revealed the name, Ye-jun. Back in the classroom, Sang-an looked at the boy and said he needed to have a word with him. If you want to know what happens next, drop a comment so I stop being lazy and do the next part faster. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if possible. Thanks.